Economics is underneath so much of our daily experience, but it's about more than just money and finance. I'm Eddie Wu, and I'm here at the University of Sydney to talk to a couple of people who can share their insight and explain to us what economics is really all about. Becca, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to know a bit more about you and your role here at the university.
I lecture. I'm an economist by training, and so I lecture in several different economics units at the University of Sydney. I'm specifically an environmental economist, and so I teach a third-year environmental economics course. I also teach a first-year course called the Economics of Everything, and we cover pretty much everything. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but we cover a lot of topics. Each week we look at a different social issue that economists think about, from crime to inequality to the environment to dating. No social issue is without reach for what we look at. And so that's what I do on the lecturing side. On my research side, I'm an environmental economist, and I particularly am interested in studying single-use plastic, its use and its disposal, and how we can get people to use less of it, to recycle it if they do use it, and to think about other different types of products they could be using instead, so reusable items as well.
I love the breadth of what it is that you can cover, and it must be really challenging trying to choose some of those different things. I wonder if you could take any example that you like and sort of drill down a little further into me and my everyday experience as Joe Average. Where would I encounter economics, and how would an understanding of economics help me interpret the world I live in?
Well, economics is all about making decisions. It's about people making decisions, businesses making decisions, governments making decisions. So let's take a decision that you've made today. So I see you have a drink.
Yes.
What kind of drink do you have?
It was a delightful hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate. Okay, so that was a decision that you made. An economist would look at that decision and think, okay, first of all, what are the benefits of the decision? Hopefully, you got enjoyment from your hot chocolate, a warm beverage on a cold day, and so that's an important benefit that would go into that decision. Then there's the costs of the decision, how much you spent to purchase it, both your money as well as your time. Did you walk to the local coffee shop and stand in line? That's also a cost of that decision. So we would, in economic theory, we would think that the benefits, if those outweigh the costs, then you make that decision. But there's an added wrinkle, which is that economists are also really interested in the constraints that you face. And so we think that you choose the thing that makes you the most happy given the constraints that you have. So how much time you have, how much money is in your wallet, that's going to affect what kind of drink that you purchase. You might have actually wanted to get the largest hot chocolate that they had available, but if you didn't have enough money in your wallet to purchase it, you chose a next size down. And so economists think a lot about the benefits of decisions, the cost of decisions, and the constraints that people face when they make those decisions.
So the complexity of such a simple choice is, why it's so important to develop that understanding. I'd love to know a bit about, when I came to here at the University of Sydney, I studied an education degree, and that made it relatively straightforward that I got on the path to becoming a high school teacher, which is what I am now. But if I were to say, I'm going to go and study an economics degree, does that necessarily mean that I would become an economist? Like, what are the career paths and opportunities that are opened by an economics degree like here?
Definitely not necessarily will you become an economist. The tools that you get in studying economics can be applied very broadly, and that's why you see people with economic backgrounds in all types of industries, nonprofit, for-profit, in government. It's about developing a toolkit that can be applied very broadly. So for instance, it's a lot about critical thinking, about asking questions about the world and developing tools to understand why people made the decisions they did.
So Becca, you're now an academic in economics, but could you tell us a bit about your own journey into this world?
Yeah, when I was in high school, I did not know what I wanted to study or what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was interested in environmental issues, I was interested in maths, I was interested in international relations, and I really was pulled in all these different directions. And I very luckily had a close mentor who said, Becca, have you considered economics? Because economics is a discipline where you take analytical thinking, critical, problem solving, looking at data, and you apply it to social issues such as environmental issues. So I was really lucky that, as someone who didn't know much about economics, that someone tapped me on the shoulder and said, you really should consider this. And what economics did for me is that it gave me a sort of a toolkit for thinking about how the world works, for answering questions about why the economy is the way it is and why people make the decisions that they make. And then this toolkit can be applied very broadly. So for me, as someone interested in environmental issues, I'm able to apply the economics toolkit to the environment. For other people who are interested in social issues such as homelessness or inequality, the economics toolkit can also be applied there. So you see economists working in all different types of industries, nonprofit, for-profit, working for government, because this toolkit that's developed in studying economics can really be applied very broadly.
To stretch the metaphor a little bit, I would love to open up this toolkit and dive inside a little bit. You've talked about how useful all these concepts and ideas can be, but I'd love to know a little bit about, if I reached inside this toolkit, what kinds of things after a few years studying an economics degree, what things will I learn and what things will I be equipped with after spending some time here at the university studying economics?
Right, well, at the university level, the first 2 years you focus on studying microeconomics, macroeconomics, and econometrics. So microeconomics is all about how individual actors, people, firms, governments, how they make decisions. Macroeconomics zooms out and thinks, if we aggregate all those individuals into a society, into a country, how are the interactions occurring there? What sort of market structures exist? How do businesses and governments and individuals interact? And then that sort of third one I talked about, the econometrics, that's about learning statistical tools to analyze economic data, to pull out patterns, to understand how the world works, and then to communicate those to others. So those are the skills you really hone in on your first 2 years at university. In your third year then, you can try different types of applying those toolkit to other classes. So there's labor economics. You can think about how labor markets work. There's financial economics classes, there's environmental economics classes, health economics. There's so many different sort of subfields within economics that you really dive into in your third year.
Becca, I am someone who lives in the world of secondary schools, and so I'm thinking a lot about my current students and many of them who would be considering not just an economics degree, but say a business degree as well, and thinking, I don't really fully understand what the differences are between them. I'm wondering if you can help us get a grip on how these kinds of things are different and what sort of paths they would get students on if they chose one or the other.
Economics is what we call a social science, and both words, social and science, are very important. So economics applies the scientific method to understand social issues. The scientific method, as many students have learned before their high school studies, first involves observing the world and asking questions about why are things the way they are. Then developing hypotheses. And in economics, we use economic theories and models to help us come up with those hypotheses. We then collect data and analyze it to see, does it match our hypothesis? And then we communicate what we find in our data and in our models to the broader world. So you really think like a scientist when you're an economist. Communication skills are very important. Analytical skills are really important. And this is part of the reason it can be so broadly applied. Business studies is a bit more focused on being a practitioner of how businesses make profit. Learning how to do accounting or finance. Instead of being necessarily a social science, it's more on the practice side. So if you know you want to be an accountant, then you would definitely want to study accounting and do a bachelor's of commerce. But if you are interested in a toolkit that can be applied to many different industries, maybe not necessarily on the practitioner side, but more on the research and analytical side, being more of a scientist, then I would definitely encourage you to consider economics.
I can certainly think a lot of my students who would find that opportunity to apply some deep thinking to really wicked problems is an exciting, journey to embark on. So it's fantastic. Just bringing back to for a final note to those students again, I wonder if you could contemplate maybe yourself before you entered, college and university in that world, and some of our people right now who are on the precipice of making some big decisions about what they might do post-school. Do you have any final thoughts or encouragements to them that might guide their thinking and decision making?
Yeah, well, deciding what to study is an economic decision, just like deciding what kind of drink you are going to have today. And so importantly, I would like students to think about the benefits. What do they enjoy studying? What skills do they want to develop? Benefits could be the specific career that a study leads you to, but it also could be the set of skills that you learn along the way. And so especially for someone like myself who didn't know what they wanted to do, developing skills that could be applied broadly was very, very beneficial to me. And then there's also, it's important to think about the cost side as well. If there's something you particularly don't like about a field of study, that should be a consideration as well in the decision-making process. And so I think it's very important to follow your interests because it's something you're going to be doing for 2 years at the high school level and then another 3 potentially at the university level.
Becca, I wonder if you could give us some examples of places or different lines of work that an economics degree would actually equip students to do.
Some recent examples, the tech sector is hiring economists like hotcakes. Amazon, Twitter, Uber, Airbnb, they're all hiring economists because they want to understand how people are making decisions with the technology and the apps that they provide. Sports teams hire economists because they want to get the most out of their players. So in particular, Moneyball, an economist was very involved in the creation of Moneyball. He used statistics and economics tools to think about what players the team could afford that had the best skills and were able to create this winning team using economics and statistics. Economists are also used or hired in government, crafting policy, understanding how can we reach our social objectives in the most efficient way without wasting resources. Economists study pandemics, which we're all very familiar with at this point, and thinking about healthcare policy and how to spend these resources wisely. Resources are limited. So lots of exciting areas where economists are hired, not just in banks, but in tech firms, in sports firms, in so many different arenas we can think of an economist being useful.
I think it goes back to what you said about economics being about decisions, and in any realm in which that's important, that's where economic thinking and principles can help us. Becca, it is brilliant that we get to have someone with your knowledge and insight and expertise here at the university. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.